This is Truffles. He's my emotional support animal and my spirit animal. He's actually not an emotional support animal. He's incapable of supporting anybody. He's neurotic. But every time I'm on Zoom or any other meeting,
My
Truffles
goodness.
appears. This is just Truffles
That's
at his
hilarious.
best.
I love it though, and that's a perfect way to start. Welcome to another episode of the Storm Before the Calm podcast. I am your host, Lori Grace Bailey. I think I'm getting a little better at these introductions, but today I always say I have a really special guest because they are really special to me.
Well, you have interviewed
Dr.
some really amazing people.
It has been wonderful. Dr. Jason Persoff. I think I got it right this time. He's been so integral to speaking out and shaping the safety of storm chasers on in the field. And he's also been a storm chaser as long as I can remember. Like since I've been interested in storm chasing, I've seen photos, amazing storm photos and all that good stuff. But instead of me talking about it, Dr. Jason, and I know you said it's just Jason, but Jason, can you let us know, the people who might not know who you are? Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? And first of all, by the way, welcome to the podcast. I really am blessed to have you here.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Truffles, my puppy, is going to sit here and help with the interview until he decides
That's
he's done.
perfect.
Yeah, it's funny. I do a lot of disaster research, and I have a grant with the Department of Defense, and
Wow.
he's the sponsor, the executive sponsor. Everyone's agreed with that. He appears on our websites and our materials. So I'm Jason Persoff, and I was born and raised out here in Aurora, Colorado, where I am now. And actually, I guess you could say I started storm chasing when I was about 8 or 9 years old, but not really
Wow.
chasing so much as that was when I got my first camera. It was during the early spring, and back then we used to get a lot of tornadoes up near the Denver metro area. And I always loved when the big storms would come rolling on through and
Yeah.
taking photos with my camera. But in any case, I grew up to be a physician, which was something I'd always wanted to do and become, but never lost my passion for storm chasing. They eventually intersected, which is kind of
Sure.
wild, in 2011.
Right.
I was in Joplin when it was destroyed by the
My
tornado.
goodness.
Yeah, I was actually chasing that storm, caught in a really bad part of the RFD, and ended up
Really?
responding to the only other working hospital in Joplin, which was Freeman Health System after St. John's, which was the primary, one of the other hospitals in the area was destroyed. Ended up working for about 18 hours, 12,
No
18 hours. I
kidding.
can't remember how many hours. And from that experience, recognized that my path in medicine up until that point had been about cardiac resuscitation. But when I was in that disaster, I realized there was a lot of work that needed to happen in disaster medicine to improve our readiness as a country and to improve hospital delivery of care during disasters. So it completely changed my career. And since then,
My goodness.
what I do as a day job, although it's not really a day job because I'm actually a night guy, is I am a hospitalist, which means that if you get admitted with stroke, cancer, heart attack, I'll take care of you while you're in the hospital. And that's mostly what I do. But half of the time I spend dedicated to disaster research and improving disaster response internationally.
Wow.
That's me.
And how okay, that's you. We're going to expand on a lot of this here though, because we're talking about Joplin. You're talking about, first of all, going back to Joplin really quick. Like I've always been obsessed and I've watched, I think, every single Joplin video, including the news feed when you see the tornado off in the distance, the
Yeah.
cameras
Oh yeah.
mounted on and people are like, I think that's a tornado. And then
I
it
just
just gets
think.
bigger and bigger and
Yeah.
darkness covers the land. And the people are like, you can't even hear them anymore. And I visited Joplin 3 years ago and it was really somber to drive into the park and see that and look over and I was like, that's the Walmart. I had a friend back in El Paso whose father lived in Joplin at the time and they were okay. He's a carpenter. And when the tornado moved through, also he immediately and apparently everybody who was able, from what I understand, like the level of heartwarming, just volunteer work that everybody did, they dropped what they did. And he took his chainsaw and tools and was cutting trees down and helping people out of houses that they were trapped in. But I mean, getting back to you and you were working in that hospital, I can't imagine. We don't get to see the unimaginable horrors of what actually happens to people in that. And you actually had to face that firsthand.
I did. It was interesting from a detached standpoint. The emotions were pretty incredible, but the one of the most amazing things, and true credit goes out to Joplin's residents, was the tornado occurred right before shift change at the hospital. And so they were very fortunate that they had 2 shifts of employees there for nursing, physician staff, et cetera. So they were double staffed, which is actually really
Wow.
positive. But these people didn't know if their own home had been destroyed. They only knew that there were mass numbers of casualties coming to the emergency department, and yet they all kept their professionalism. People don't know that when an EF5 hits an urban center, a lot of stuff gets broken. Phones don't work, cell phones down. It was really kind of a blackout. So people didn't know. They were asking patients where they lived to try and triangulate whether their homes had been in the path of the tornado.
So
But mostly
they didn't know if their own loved ones were okay, and yet they worked through the
they
immediate
worked through it.
urgency?
They worked through it, and it was really a touching experience to see this kind of dedication to one another, taking care of
Yeah.
each other even in the absence of that. It took until about 3 a.m. when the first portable cell trucks arrived into, or at least the cell trucks which reached Freeman Health System that night. And it was a fascinating experience from just seeing the trauma that occurs from tornado damage. I wasn't prepared for how much debris was covering people. Like, I've always
Really?
thought about this, intellectually in the March or in the May 3rd, 99 Oklahoma City tornadoes. There were people who basically had their skin removed from debris abrasions underneath
Wow.
the overpass bridge off of 35. But the amount of debris that got basically atomized by the tornado and lifted aloft and embedded into people,
No.
examining patients was actually pretty dangerous because occasionally I had my glove cut open by glass fragments embedded in patients who were right in the path. The thing that was also really amazing, and it may have just been shock, but even the patients themselves were very, very patient with all of us who were trying to care for them. And so in the emergency department, it was really impressive. With There was a point in time, so I started off working in the emergency department for the first hour and a half. I honestly don't remember time. I just remember volume. And
Sure.
it was they found out that I was a internal medicine physician with a
They
background in
used
critical
you right
care.
away.
Well, there were a number of series of errors. Like, I have actually learned since then, I should never have been allowed to do what I was doing there.
Oh,
That
shoot.
I was not a
Liabilities?
good choice. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because now I run disaster stuff for my
Uh-huh.
hospital, and we would never let somebody under any circumstance do what I did. But I believe that my higher power, God, works
Huh.
in very mysterious ways. I was in the
Right.
right place at the right time, and they utilized me and retroactively gave me privileges for that hospital, so that I was actually retroactively covered
It
for
was
practicing
Spiritu
medicine.
Santo, you're good to go, you're blessed,
You're
let's
good.
go.
You're good. You go. You do your things.
Oh my gosh.
But so I did some critical care medicine. I'd had been an EMT many years ago, and so they put me to work in the emergency room. But then the patients from the other hospital that had been destroyed, which was only about 150 yards away. I mean, the two hospitals were right next to each other. The tornado moved just a little bit further south. There would have
Mm,
been no hospitals in Joplin. They would have both been destroyed. They started bringing in patients from the other hospital, St. John's, and they eventually moved me to take care of all of those patients. And that was actually kind of relieving because these patients were more my profile of what I do day in and day
I
out.
see.
But even then, other than one guy who was really upset that I couldn't discharge him on the white pills that his doctor was supposed to prescribe for him. And yeah, I have no idea what a white pill is.
I
Everyone else who came over was so respectful. They were all in one room. I had at one time, I think, about 35 patients in one room. Beds rotated out and through. And they were all just very respectful and quiet, very calm. They pointed out other people who may have needed me first. No one wanted me to take care of them first, which was very
Yeah.
giving and trusting. And
Wow.
so it was a powerful night. But I think it was. I'll tell you the most interesting thing about this, Lori, is that that day the storm looked like it was going to be a complete bust. Just
Really?
45 minutes before Joplin, I said to my partner at the time, I was out chasing with, that this looks like somebody vomited on my radar screen. Like, it
Oh,
was just a
wow.
bunch of different reds and
Mess.
yellows, and
Yeah.
I was like, this is terrible. And then it got a little bit of a nudge from a storm to the south, and it went from nothing to, as you've seen from all the videos,
Hmm.
absolutely amazing. It got wider faster than it traveled.
Right.
A debris ball appeared like literally within 10 minutes of the tornado forming, which is staggering to me. I've never
No
seen tornado
kidding. That
genesis like this before.
SRH and low level shear
Everything
must have just gone crazy right at the
went
bottom.
nuts. It actually formed a small eye for a while. And so we were on the western end of it because I was
Wow.
actually driving to Joplin to call it a night.
No kidding.
And when it went fully tornadic, so it was quite an incredible thing. But the I think one of the things that really struck me about this was for years I've chased tornadoes. I probably officially, other than when I was 8 years old, started formally chasing at the end of college when there was a USA Today article about storm chasers. Up to that point, I hadn't known you could actually like. I
Hmm.
loved being in tornado watches and loved when the storms came, and then got sad when they went off to the distance. I didn't
Yeah.
never occurred to me because sometimes my brain doesn't work that way. You could be in a car and actually follow the storm. So that was around, you know,
Right.
91 ish, 1990.
Wow.
And back then, busting, by the way, not a problem.
Really? It
I'd go to Stapleton
par for the
Airport back
course.
when there was Stapleton Airport instead of DIA. That was where the weather service was. That you'd look at some maps, talk to some forecasters, and then the way you navigated was with, a ham radio and stopping in lobbies to watch Weather Channel to get latest radar updates. So you missed all. I
So
mean, you
you were
missed
a
all the
part of
fun.
the don't fold the maps generation, right?
Right. Oh yeah, definitely.
My goodness.
Definitely. Delorme Road Atlas.
No
Beautiful
kidding.
piece of work. But it was fun because there was no pressure. Something
Yeah.
that's changed is there's incredible pressure now. But anyway, just
My
going
goodness.
back to sort of the transition as I grew as a storm chaser,
Yeah.
I'd never been I'd never chased a powerful tornado before. All of my tornadoes were really
Mm,
low end and photogenic, most of them. This was a truly powerful tornado. I'd seen one other really powerful wedge tornado in 2004 in northeast Kansas, but it basically missed everything. So it did some EF3 damage, but nothing like this. This was a tornado into a metro area, and there were so many horrific stories from that day of people ignoring the tornado sirens.
man,
And Roger Hill talks about how he got flipped off by a couple teenagers when
really.
he told them there's a tornado coming, and they are presumed dead.
By the way, if you go online and look at some of the Joplin videos, there's a video of one of Roger Hill's guests recording most of the escape basically. And he was in the second van. You can hear Roger screaming into the microphone. I've never heard Roger in any of his videos where he's screaming, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. And just, it's almost inaudible. And you just see it getting darker and darker. And then you start to see, you eventually, it's dark. And then you eventually can make out a little bit of the left edge, I think. And I think they were truly paralyzed in fear, with fear trying to get out of that. I don't know. I've never seen anything like that, but all the people that I've talked to who have seen El Reno and Joplin say the same thing, that it really, the fear factor really kicks in like
Well, I'll tell you
never
that
before.
it was amazing being on the rear flank of that because, of course, I'd gotten behind the storm because at the time it was just a
No kidding.
multicellular mess. So I didn't want to be in the mess. So
Hmm.
we were on the west side, ended up intersecting with Cloud Nine tours with Charles Edwards
Okay.
and George Karunas was with Cloud Nine. And as we were kind of coming in on the western side, the RFD was freaking amazing. First of all, there were multiple inflow stingers that knocked over trucks on the highway. And then
Yeah, yeah.
the RFD, which we weren't actually physically in the RFD. The RFD was actually in front of us by maybe about a
Hmm.
half a mile. But I've never seen an RFD like this. You could actually see just it was horizontal motion across the whole thing. And I've never
Wow.
seen lightning like this in my entire life, which was I call them lightning zits. A
Hmm.
lot like anvil zits, but they were in the RFD. These very bright, short lightning strikes that kind of just zipped horizontally with the RFD, and
What?
they were so short, like they were just snapped and
Hmm.
gone, unlike a lot of our lightning, which does lots of different things. But this was really intense. And the other thing that I really remember was
Wow.
the feeling of knowing that I was experiencing infrasound. So infrasound is used as a weapon in the military, and the reason it's used that way is it's sound we can't quite hear, but it actually stimulates the temporal lobes and can result in panic and flight or fight sort of responses. And it's a very low bass sound. And I can tell you that when my feet were on the ground, I felt this odd, unsettled reaction. And it got better when I got back in my car, which was even more bizarre. But I've never seen an RFD like that in my life, which looked tornadic. And we could also hear obviously the roar of the tornado. And also a lot of, you could hear destruction happening, but it was very faint and in the background from where we were. The tornado ultimately crossed north of us off the highway by about a mile and a half, 2 miles. And then eventually we my partner and I went back to find the only other hospital that was open, which was Freeman. And I've never experienced coming over a crest of a hill. So a lot of really weird things happened there. The
Mhm.
first is as we came over the crest of the hill, there were farm animals that had landed in the streets. The streets were leveled. You could look east for what looked like forever, and things were pretty well flattened. As we
Wow.
approached the hospital, so there were people actually screaming for help that I
Oh,
bypassed to try and
man.
get to the hospital because I knew I couldn't help them
Mhm.
out in the field. There were just too many. And we actually got to the hospital, and the traffic lights outside the hospital were working, surprisingly. The
Mm.
only ones that were working. It was a red light. And I couldn't turn into the hospital because it was a red light. So I came to a full stop. And,
Right.
and my chase partner comes on the radio and goes, "You do realize no one's going to pull you over, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I guess." Because I mean, I just was
Yeah.
looking for some normalcy, and that was so normal that I felt
No,
okay
that
stopping at a red light because I know
that
how to do
happens.
that. Yeah, it
Do
was
you
an
do you
amazing
do you
night.
know that when I used to pursue people, in traffic stops and they would take off because they were up to no good, more often than not, when you're going through a neighborhood and you're trying to follow someone, you know what they do? They
Signal,
turn on their signals.
they do.
Their turn signals, because for them they're just in autopilot, and they're thinking flee, and there's so much going through. But also they need to go back to rudimentary things, right? Stoplight, I got to stop. It's those things that are ingrained into us, and it's the way that we're wired. That's pretty wild. But
Yeah,
my goodness, I mean, I've never heard of that account. I can't imagine farm animals falling through, other than Twister, where like we got cows, but falling from the sky,
I don't
that's
know that they
that's
were
quite a
necessarily
testimony.
picked up as much as blown sideways
Dragged
and
and
rolled. I mean, and my farm animals, it was maybe one or two cows, but I mean,
mhm.
there was an incredible amount
Everything.
of debris,
Mhm.
incredible amount of debris around everything.
The tornado damage of Joplin and El Reno,
Both are similar.
not necessarily El Reno, but the Joplin, and I'm thinking of
Tuscaloosa,
Green
no,
Tuscaloosa as
Greensburg.
well.
Yeah,
Greensburg.
Greensburg was a north-south tornado that night.
You know what I like in that too is I watched every video also on the tsunamis, the one in Thailand and then the one that hit Fukushima, and in Japan as well. And the damage looks very similar. It's just pulverization. You know what I mean? With
Correct.
water or air, it's just this pulverization of materials.
And
Doesn't matter
people were
how thick
covered
they
in
are.
that. That was the thing I wasn't fully aware of. I mean, I always had figured people would be covered in some debris, but basically, a lot of these structures were very old,
Mhm.
and uh, they basically crumbled, and they had some cinder block foundations, and all of that stuff became this very fine cement that actually filled people's ears. We had to help brush this off their eyes with moist compresses. It was very coarse. I never fully appreciated it. And it was ubiquitous for anyone who was actually in the path of the tornado. They were covered in that. And that was also true for the patients who came over from St. John's. The St. John's Hospital was interesting. So, take small miracles when you can get them. But the weekend that the Joplin tornado occurred,
Mhm.
the hospital, St. John's, was actually transitioning to an electronic medical record. And so they actually underfilled the hospital. It was half full that
Right.
weekend. Had it been another week, give or take, they would have been full and double their occupancy, and fatalities would
Yikes.
have been tremendous. As it was, because of the medical record, which a lot of physicians will joint, that's the first time that a health record's actually saved anyone's life, because there's such pains in the neck when you're first getting them.
Right.
They've gotten
right.
much better since 2011. But the top 2 floors of St. John's were destroyed, and, I had patients from, just below that, the top floor, who described all kinds of things. One nurse was swept away that he saw, one patient.
Goodness. No
Everything that
way.
was attached to patients that we put on them, EKG leads, IV
Mhm.
tubing, all of that stuff actually became weaponized as the tornado
My
hit because it
goodness.
blew out the windows on both sides of the building and you get a wind tunnel. So there's actually
Mhm.
acceleration of the winds
Right. Into these
through there.
corridors. Mhm.
Yep. And so windows were blown out, things were blown completely through the building, through and through. My patients were completely covered in debris, and they were just very lucky to be alive.
Right.
There's some great video of the security camera footage
Mhm.
from inside St. John's, which gives
Yeah.
you an idea of just how much weaponization occurs of just everyday objects, which has prompted me to often tell people, it's
Wow.
when you're thinking about. So one of my biggest fears, I understand people want a zero meter, and I totally get that
Yeah.
because it it's you're getting to be up close to a force of nature, but
It's the thrill of the
if you
chase, right? It's not the kill, it's
yeah,
the thrill of the chase.
I think it's dangerous. I will never do it. I did enough accidental zero metering when I was like learning how to do this
Whoops.
way
Right.
in the old days when we didn't have radar, where a lot of the times it was like, well, F.
You lucked out. Right.
But but intentionally doing it, if the tornado turns on you and you are hit by that tornado, it is absolutely brutal what happens to people when that happens. It's
Right.
it's
Right.
just it's mind boggling.
No, I understand that too. And having a law enforcement background, being out in the public, I won't, it's hard to even talk about some of the scenes when just vehicles crashing and things like that.
Yeah,
When you're
absolutely.
responding and you see people out of their vehicles and you're looking at them like, what are you doing out here? Where's your car? And then you look or you see someone in front of their car and you're like, why are you not in your car? And just that's another story as well. And I'm not here to sensationalize the damages, and neither are you. I think it's essential to hear about this though, for the very fact that this isn't something that's a once in a lifetime thing. Guess what? The time is ticking for another major tornado to be moving into another major city. And that worries me. I mean, we just saw it in Kankakee. That was
In
pretty
Michigan.
scary.
It
Yeah,
was.
and that was an EF3 for Pete's sake. Holy cow.
Well, EF3 is still horrific damage if
Yeah.
you're in our soft little meat sacks that we are.
Yeah.
People have
Right.
to remember simple force, right? F equals ma.
Mhm.
So force equals mass times acceleration. Well, that
Mhm.
acceleration piece gets pretty substantial when you go from 0 to 160 miles per hour. And
Right.
that leads to an incredible amount of force. And it's very easy to underappreciate how serious
Mhm.
this is, especially when you're standing just a little bit back from it and you're not experiencing those same forces.
So, Connor shared a video with me that the tornado was coming at such a speed across the street in a mobile home park. Several people lost their lives, and I think a child also died as well. And he and his sister took shelter in a gas station across the street. And they went in, and he was like, "It's coming." You could just hear this rolling train coming. He wasn't sure which way, so he thought best to hunker down in a gas station. By the way, these smaller, quick build Family Dollar buildings, I would never see covered there. But he did what he thought was best. And when he went in, there were a lot of people in there. And that video is haunting. You can see him getting to the back, and the tornado comes through and just shreds everything in the store. And they come out. I think that the back warehouse, or the
Yeah, I
what's it
remember
called,
this.
the cooler or whatever. Yeah, and they're all okay, thankfully. Whoo, man, people need to go watch that video because it is telling of. And I don't even think I think that was an EF3 also, if I remember correctly. But yeah, EF3, they're no fun either. I mean, imagine just getting hit at 40 miles an hour, like braking and hitting a car or a deer at 40 miles an hour. Your truck or your car is going to take some serious beating, and you don't want that on your own person. So it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. You still decided, even since Joplin, I still like this water vapor spinning.
Yeah.
What's up with that? Like,
Well, that's
that
interesting. I
didn't
actually was
stop you, right?
zigging there for a second and I forgot to zag back. But so at 3 in the morning, we finally get cell service, and I call my wife and tell her I'm okay, and she's like, "Why are you telling me you're okay?" And I'm like, "Oh,
Oh my
you haven't
goodness.
heard about Joplin." Told her about stuff, and then continued to
Wow.
work until around, I don't remember, in the morning sometime when they finally had somebody to replace me. And I went to a hotel, and I had to travel 150 miles to get to a hotel because all of them were taken in Joplin. So
Yeah.
I think I made it all the way to Tulsa, and
Dang.
uh, got into a motel, and um, went to sleep for a few hours, and then realized that this was also a high risk day. So this was a high risk
My
followed by high
goodness.
risk. Maybe it was moderate. I can't quite remember, but the day after Joplin in central Oklahoma. And
Mhm.
I had to somehow reconcile myself with the idea that I'd just seen this incredible damage and how weird it was for me to be looking forward to chasing again.
Wow.
How do I savor and enjoy the storms when I realize what it did to these people's lives?
Mhm.
And it was a really tough moral conundrum. And I spent a great deal of the day as I drove eventually to central Oklahoma, where I busted
Right.
pretty hard. Actually, there's a great story behind that too. But I busted while I was chasing. I really was trying to decide whether or not my ethics allowed me to chase in the face of
Really.
human suffering. And
Hmm.
I eventually came to some sort of, at the time, it was sort of a resting spot of I can't stop the weather by not chasing. Like if I could, I would just stop, and then there would be no issues. But I can't do that. So
Mhm.
me being there to witness it is also important in different ways. And it's a spiritual journey for me every time I chase anyway, because I absolutely feel connected to nature and the
Right.
powers around me. And so I settled there. And over the years, this has become that, I was placed in the right position for Joplin,
Yeah.
which actually started 2 days before, actually the day before. So the day before Joplin, we were driving from Southwest Kansas, and actually that was the last time that I got to see Tim Samaras. We met him up at I think it was in Liberal, at a Pizza Hut there with Tony Lubach and like the whole crew.
That's
We
a
had
cute little
dinner
town.
there, and then my friends and I decided we were going to head east to Wichita to sort of stage for the next day. Part of the reason we were going there was Rocky was going to have his annual tornado picnic, which used to be a tradition. Unfortunately, he no longer does this anymore, but in central
Oh,
Oklahoma. So we'd go from Wichita to his place the next day. And on the drive back, I hate wildlife with a passion. So I always,
no.
if we're in a caravan, don't tell my partners. I'll always put them in front of me, and I'll kind of hang back in the middle thinking that'll be fine.
Mhm.
But a deer decided that right after the first cars had come by, now was the time to leap from the
My
median while I
goodness.
was going 60. And I
Yeah.
nailed that thing, beheaded a deer, trashed the
Shoot.
car that I was in, which was fortunately a rental car because at the time I was living in Florida. And so I didn't get to go to the picnic that day.
Mhm.
I ended up being stuck in Wichita getting a new rental car. And
Wow.
that allowed me to chase the Joplin tornado. So
No
and
kidding.
my
So these
friends who
turn
I
of
chased
events.
with,
Yeah.
yeah, my friends who chased with were in Oklahoma. They weren't disappointed either. They ended up getting some really cool tornadoes in central and eastern Oklahoma that same day as Joplin. But it's just funny how these things work out. But for
Mhm.
the deer, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been in Joplin. But for Joplin, I wouldn't have had the same focus and passion that I do in my career today. So
Interesting.
that's where I've settled spiritually.
It's deeply personal. Each and every person has to make their own decisions and come up with their own set of rules, right? This is a as a I see this as an argument point, as an arguing point on Twitter all the time or in the storm chasing community. No, if you're a chaser, you have no obligation to help people. And then you have
No,
other
that's
people
wrong.
saying, "Oh, you need to be prepared. You look, I've got 5, 10, I've got 10 emergency bags, and I've got, I've got," and you have the whole thing, right? You have opinions that are so varied, and everybody feels like they're right. They're like, "You can't tell me otherwise." And the fact of the matter is, like you said, this is a personal ethics thing. And what you just so clearly established here is that it's a journey too. Bottom line is none of us really know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't. And
Right.
it's that personal journey. Storm chasing is so personal. We
It
all
is.
are stuck together. We chase together. We bust together, but we don't really focus just on how deeply personal storm chasing is to each and every one of us. And we have to develop our own code, our own moral code and ethics code of what we're going to do beforehand, right?
Well, I think there's a few things that I want to comment about that. Earlier, you said it's very personal. For the deer that I hit, it was extremely personal. It took it very poorly,
You
but
didn't have
in
venison for dinner for the next few weeks, did you?
no, 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 no. It was a clean beheading, though. Way, yeah. Oh dear is right. Yep, it really was. And why my car? I mean, could have hit anyone
Yeah.
else's. But I do want to comment. I do have some opinions about this.
Okay.
So one of the things that I think people forget is that when we're chasing, we're actually chasing very frequently through small towns that pay for their own road upkeep,
Mhm.
that pay for their own litter upkeep, that pay for their water. And I think it behooves us to be gentle travelers in
Mm.
these areas, meaning that I, I don't care who you think you are. Traffic laws apply, particularly at stop signs. We've
Oh
already
goodness,
seen
yes.
2 accidents this year so
Right.
far due to
That Channel 4, truck
yeah,
was
T-bone.
completely
T-bone,
totaled.
no, yeah, brand new novice chaser went right through
Mhm.
a stop sign.
My
You
goodness.
cannot chase and have situational awareness if you're focused on your device,
Mhm.
especially if you're focusing on the devices you're recording with. You're not
Yeah.
situationally aware when you glance at those. Now, I glance at a radar all the time too, so I'm just as guilty as anyone else
Mhm.
to do that. But the difference is, I don't speed when I'm chasing. I speed all the time. Don't tell the cops that are watching this, but I speed all the time at home on my roads. But yeah, but when I'm out on the plains, you won't find me maybe up to 5 over, but you won't find me speeding.
Mhm.
And the reason that I don't speed is because I'm trying to be gentle for the communities through which I travel. These are their roads, their locations. We are not the center of the universe as chasers.
Mhm.
They are not there to help us. We are there to be of some service to them and allow us to have passage. But I will tell you, on the both extremes that you listed, it's not acceptable to me for somebody to say, I don't have to do anything.
Mm.
Calling 911 is the
Yeah.
simplest act you can do. And
Right.
if you see destruction, you do not have any obligation, true, to stop and render first aid. I
Mhm.
totally agree with that. No one does. There's shades in there, and it depends on what state you're in. In
Yeah.
some states,
Right.
such as in Vermont, if you go by an accident scene and don't call 911, it's actually against the law.
Mm.
You've committed a misdemeanor that can get you ticketed and fined. So,
Interesting.
not that I know how they figure this out, that you
Yeah.
drove by, but
Right.
you everyone should call 911 if they see destruction. This is
There is a
simple.
minimum. Right.
Just do that. You don't have to stop your car. You don't have to talk to people, but you absolutely must engage in walking softly through these communities,
Mhm.
partying, speeding to catch up to that tornado. When I think about people who are affected by this out in the fields, which I drove
Yeah.
by because I was going to the hospital, I think about how frustrating that must be to see people screaming and
To
yodeling
be a farmer or a civilian in the
and speeding
streets.
past, not even caring at all what that
Mhm.
does to you emotionally inside. But
Yeah.
then the second part to that is I would strongly urge people not to perform search and rescue. Um,
Really? Okay.
Absolutely not. Unless you are trained in search and rescue. And even then, um, I don't
Good to
recommend
know.
that at all. I recommend helping people you can help who are out of the house or out of a structure. There is an urgency that people feel to try and rescue people, but by far the statistics are in favor of you becoming a victim yourself. And if you become a victim,
No kidding.
you have just added to the strain of the emergency response
Yeah.
that is happening. And you may feel the obligation because somebody's life may be on the line, but there are many times where
Mhm.
extricating somebody from a structure may actually result in them having a severe injury as a consequence. For example,
Right.
with crush injuries. So if
Mhm.
somebody gets crushed by a part of a structure and it goes across their thighs and breaks their femur, for example, when you relieve that pressure that has been applied by the structure, what ends up happening is all those muscle enzymes, all those muscles break down. They send off lots of potassium in the bloodstream. Patients can develop arrhythmias and die. So when you
Wow.
actually remove that, you actually start a clock before they may die from the injury that was actually under control, believe it or not, while they were compressed.
Right.
So rescue highly discourage that. The other thing I've seen, which is kind of strange, is people advertising that they're there to search and rescue. The moment you do that, you now have an obligation and you may not legally be able to do the things that you're doing.
Mm,
Stay within your scope. The best first aid that you can ever give someone is
great
to be
advice.
with them, is just to be with them. Call 911, just be with them. If you have advanced first aid training and want to use it and can do so safely without having to rescue someone, you
Yeah.
are welcome to do so. But for the God's sake, just being with somebody, imagine instead of
Mm,
those cars racing by, somebody came out and just brought a blanket.
yeah.
What a difference it makes for those tornado victims. And I think
Jason,
it's the right thing to do.
I'm going to cut in here and first of all, thanks for. I mean, I think that's such a balanced approach. But you're saying there is something that you can do. There, don't do nothing. There is no excuse for doing nothing. But
Correct.
there is a very minimum that each and every one. And I think that's the human condition. I think that's an expectation that we all have. But at the same time, you're cautioning people that you could make it worse. And I think that's the tempered response that we need. That everybody can take as a universal rule to go into a situation. Heaven forbid we would encounter these kind of dangers this year.
I'll also share with you one other thing that a lot of people don't consider when they go off and do rescue mode, by the way, is are you up to date on your tetanus shot, your hepatitis
Right.
shot? Are you
Exactly.
willing to get infectious diseases if somebody's bleeding and you interact with
Hmm.
somebody who's bleeding? We have to also maintain personal safety.
Yeah.
But one other big thing, I can't say this enough because it's
Hmm.
heartbreaking to me. When we get together, in these little gaggles of chasers and what have you at gas stations and stuff, we have to be very measured
Yeah.
about how we talk about that severe weather
Hmm.
because the people who are living there are actually living it. And so when people are like celebrating and jumping up and down and acting excited for bad things to happen, just, be mindful of the people who are around you. It's the least you
Yeah.
can do. Because I'll tell you right now, if somebody was outside my house jumping up and down and hoping for the tornado to touch down near my house, I'd be pretty
We
ragey.
see that. We see that on the planes. We hear people getting upset. We hear people. I don't know. You hear accounts about that all the time, where people are worried, like, "Oh man, this guy was so pissed off. I got on his ranch." And most people. But
Don't
here's the thing.
trespass. That's
I
the
know.
first rule.
I know. But the other thing is how many chasers out there have been sitting on the side of a road and someone comes up to you and you're thinking, "Oh crap, I'm going to get yelled at. This guy's pulling a horse trailer. He's going to kick me off his property." And he pulls over and he goes, "Well, Buster, is it coming towards my house?"
Yep.
How many times do people do that? It's so true. They're just worried about if they're going to be okay, or if they've got to notify their kids. And we're all, pumped and excited that the low level jet's starting to ramp up at night. And yeah, that's kind of
And
a
it's
tough
okay
thing
to
to
be
do.
excited. It's okay to be excited about witnessing an amazing phenomenon. I don't have a problem with that. Or celebrating privately, together in a hotel room, for example, is not a problem. But out in public, please be mindful of the people around you and
Yeah.
keep in mind that, again, this idea of you walk softly through these areas because
Mm,
it's a matter of respect. And one thing have been very disheartened by is there's been a very large contingent of chasers who are like, I get to chase the way I get to chase. You don't get to tell me what to do. And that's true.
exactly.
I absolutely can't tell you what to do. All I can suggest is there's more to this world than you, and it's really a good idea to be mindful of what's going on around you. It's not just about
Right.
you. Like seeing stuff get destroyed is remarkable.
Hmm.
I watch those same videos and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that is just amazing to see a structure
Hmm.
torn apart like that."
Right.
But that was someone's structure, possibly someone's home, possibly someone's life being taken.
Hmm.
We just need to be mindful of that. We don't need to be
Yeah.
perfect. No
Hmm.
one's expecting perfection, but I get concerned when people are like, "Screw you. This is all about what I'm getting out of it."
There's a lot of hubris. I've
There
seen that.
is. And I
Entitlement as
experienced it in
well.
the yeah, entitlement, all of that I experienced that in the EMS community.
Mm,
So I see that too. But really, we can all be out there and have a great time and be respectful. It's not that hard.
yeah.
It's not
None
hard.
of this is preachy, by the way. I'm just grateful that you're sharing your own tips and your own life lessons as well, and your expertise. You know about this stuff as well, and I think it needs to be heard. I hope people basically they're either going to listen or they're not. Right?
Well, the people
they're
who
gonna
are gonna listen have already been doing these things. The
yeah,
people who aren't are gonna continue to not, and they're gonna think of me as old Grandpa Persoff over here.
right.
But I think, it's, there's no such thing as an emergency chase. There's no such thing, and
What do you mean
another
by
big
that?
people who have run stoplights and stop signs and
I've got
thinking
to
that they're
chase it.
or that they're
Providing,
providing a community service by
yeah,
doing so. You provide more of a community service by just obeying the law than you do by breaking the law. And, the I think if you really wanna save a community, just follow the laws and regulations as they are. You're not special. You're not special. I think another big thing that I'm really concerned about is the explosion of lights that are on chasing vehicles.
really, yeah,
Yeah, I
all the
think those are
LEDs.
actually yeah, I understand why some people would want them so that they're higher visibility during certain
Hmm.
circumstances. So, I mean, one of the things to keep in mind is that for the common person, these lights, infer often authority, such as, most people don't know that yellow lights as a light bar
Yeah,
are not necessarily
official.
associated. Yeah,
Right.
they're not official, but they cause a lot of chaos on the roads. There are people who use them actually as though they're law enforcement officers.
Hmm.
I don't really see any benefit in them except in very low visibility settings when you're helping warn people behind you that there's something. But
Hmm.
the light bar issue is actually a traffic issue. So in some states, you're not allowed to drive with light bars going. They're meant for when
Hmm.
you're at the side of the road. So I just encourage people to think about what is the motive you have behind putting them
Hmm.
on your
It
vehicle.
looks cool.
That's not a motive.
I know.
That's vanity. What
Hmm.
is the motive of what you're doing to try and, everyone talks about how they're out there trying to save lives. How is this actually saving a life? And if modifying your vehicle is strictly for vanity, and that's okay, people have wraps, that's all
Hmm.
fine, but it's affecting other people, I would just caution you to think about this for a moment because those lights actually can lead to car accidents.
Right.
They can lead to people thinking that there are cops out there.
I'll just tell you, I 28 years as a law enforcement officer, and light bars. Guess what? I get to drive with light bars, and the real ones, the red and blues,
Yeah,
and they're not all with the entire strip of LEDs on there. And guess what? They're not, and the
yeah, I have
takedowns
those
as
too.
well, takedowns and the alley lights as well. And even when I first started, I had in
Yeah, there you go. I had that
the
too in my
handle
first
with the
med
little light on
vehicle.
the side of the Crown
Yeah,
Vic. That was a really good light because you could stop and you could look around and you could search a house or you could
yeah.
search, an alley with that light. Those were the good ones, honestly. Those kind of beams were precisely what we wanted to do. But these big takedowns, no matter what kind of conditions I was on the road and what kind of speeds I was going, those light bars didn't really do anything for me. So just take my advice or don't or not. But so
I
I
enjoyed
want to talk.
I will not deny that I loved running red lights and sirens. I loved it. When I was on a couple of fire protection districts up in Boulder County around college and early in med school. I mean, I absolutely adored that. But there's actually a what's called a wake phenomenon that can
Mhm,
occur, and a wake phenomenon is after an emergency vehicle either is approaching or going away from a scene. People are so focused on the emergency vehicle they get in a car accident as a
mhm.
result of the emergency vehicle.
Yeah.
And I thought that was all BS until actually my girlfriend at the time had just left me at the fire station up in Boulder.
Mhm.
I was driving home and I got a call and I came zipping down the road that she had left on. And she was
Yeah.
so excited to see me in my vehicle that she actually rear ended somebody else. It caused a lot of damage for both the cars. Now, I'm not saying don't have girlfriends who don't want to admire the things that you're doing. But what, again, I'm trying to say is I think a very good human way to think about things is who am I helping with this?
Yeah.
And if you are helping somebody, truly helping somebody without violating a law, then I'm all for it.
Go for it.
If it's vanity and it doesn't affect anybody else, I'm all for that too. Personal expression is great, but I do think we need to think just a little bit more about what the motive is behind what we're doing with these lights.
Yeah.
It actually does cause car accidents.
Those wigwags, as we used to call them, when you're traveling through, when you're doing emergency driving in, especially when it's a crowded city environment and there's multiple vehicles, when you pass by, everybody starts paying attention to that. And I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many of, oh, hey, 3 clicks back, there's a bumper to bumper crash and you're a 5 car crash behind you. It's true, especially, or if you're pulled over on a vehicle or, and you're dealing with whatever the situation is on the other side, guess what? How many more bumper to bumper crashes and what do they call them? Rubberneckers and stuff like that that happens because of the
Yeah,
lights.
rubbernecking is a normal response to seeing flashing lights.
Yep. Yep.
They're flashing for a reason. They're there to get people's attention.
Right.
And if you're off on the side of the road and all the way off on the side of the road, and you have them on, far less likely to cause as many problems as if you're driving with them.
I
Three, two,
wanted
one.
to move on though and ask you because you've answered a lot of questions just so organically. What lessons have you taken away from your adventures and everything else? What are, how have you grown as a person? Like, I know you're always trying to share your knowledge and trying to, your experience and hopefully people will listen and learn and maybe live vicariously and maybe learn through osmosis, right? And take that knowledge and just integrate that into their own chasing and everything. But how have you grown? Like, are you still a happy chaser? Like a lot of people,
No, no. So I think one of the things I learned is, how am I going to make this something that I enjoy? Uh,
yeah.
and as opposed to getting really frustrated, I have to always remember that it's always a laugh to me when people are complaining about how much traffic there is storm chasing while they're in the traffic. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, you're there too. So, you know, so because I contribute to the traffic, I don't usually bitch about the traffic. I'm doing the same
You're
thing.
part of the
So
problem,
I'm
right?
part of the problem. But I do think that I've become much more mindful of how my presence chasing impacts others. I've already mentioned
Mm,
about speeding
yeah.
and following the traffic rules. By the way, I just want to come out clean and say I am no angel when it comes to speeding. But when I'm through these small towns, I am very mindful of that
Mm,
because again, I want to have a gentle touch. So being
that's smart.
recognizing that there's a role for being gentle to the
Mhm.
places you're going through, but also to that extent, it means I like to go to local restaurants rather than chains.
I
I
just
like to
saw a tweet
support the
about that
local
today.
economy, right? I mean, I'm all
Yeah.
for that. And some great food, not food that is healthy for you, because again, as a physician, I will tell you there's very little that's healthy for you on the road, but there are no calories when you're chasing. And you can quote me on that.
There are no calories
So
when you're chasing. That's
yeah,
great.
no calories when you're chasing. I think the other thing is one of the disadvantages that I see for people who are really into the 0 meter kind of philosophy and getting up and close, and you really get some dramatic photos and video of the tornadoes that I enjoy watching. But for me as a chaser, there's nothing better than being able to be out of my car with the car stopped with a tripod and some time.
Same.
I think that the older I've gotten, the more I've really appreciated much more the structure of storms and framing those and being at a distance such that I actually can be out of the car for minutes at a time and enjoy the storm.
Right.
One of the other things, and Dave Lewison, who's a guy I chase
Huh.
with as well, he often says, just stop and feel your feet. And he's right. When you get out, just take a moment and be there, not through a viewfinder. Just be
Right.
there so you can remember the experience. The experience is
Mhm.
what we're out for. I mean, obviously, I want best photos in the world and whatever else.
I call that a
Whatever.
tactical pause, by the way. Like, take a
Yeah,
tactical
tactical
pause.
pause. Absolutely. Yep. And
Stop and
then
reassess but also enjoy things,
just
right?
be there
Realize the
for a
things that
moment.
you're missing. Yeah.
Correct. Another big thing is if you see a shot, stop and take the shot. You will
My
never.
goodness.
This is the biggest number one rule I have for myself.
Right.
I will never drive past a shot thinking that it will get
Wow.
better.
Or that I'll come back for this in a minute.
Yeah, and or that it will
Right.
get better over the next hill. So two
Mm.
things. I don't know how the Midwest is actually constructed, but the hill in front of me will invariably shield the hill after that. And then when I get to the
Right.
top of that, there's another hill after that. I don't know how that's possible, but there's always another hill
That's
because you think
lightning
at some point,
photography for me. I need that. I need the lightning shot where the lightning strikes the ground, and
yes.
I will forego so many other hills, but that's lightning. That's a little different.
But I mean,
And
with chasing, it's the same thing. And so the idea that it's always going to be over the next hill is going to be when the
mhm,
shot is stop, take the shot, take the shot. Trust me, you will never regret the shot you didn't, that you took. You'll
yeah,
regret always the shot you didn't take. And the other big thing is if you are in hills, dear God, get your Part 107 and get your drone license. Because
So
the
you can get
best
that
part
drone
for
out.
me has been, yeah, this past year, I was chasing a storm with a bunch of guys in rolling hills, and the storm had an incredibly well-defined wall cloud, but I couldn't
Wow.
see what was beyond the wall cloud.
Stupid hill.
Yeah, I mean, nothing gets me more infuriated than
South
hills.
Dakota, Nebraska.
And anywhere. Anytime there's a tornado touching down, there are hills. I don't know how
Hmm.
that happens. It's some sort of weird trick of geography. But putting out my drone was able to show me that the storm actually was more outflow dominant than what I thought. And so what I'm seeing wasn't actually a wall cloud, but a shelf cloud. Helped me
Mm,
re-identify where I wanted to be, and I didn't have to spend that time cursing and trying to get up to the next hill and the next hill and the next hill. And that was okay. Shelf clouds are cool too. Another big thing I've learned is appreciate the storm, man. I mean, I
mm,
love tornadoes, but most of my great photos are not of tornadoes. They're of beautiful foregrounds with incredibly cool storm features.
mhm.
So if I see a cool foreground, I will stop, even if I'm on the pursuit for a tornado, to get that type of photo. That's my own personal belief.
I love it.
And always have an exit strategy. How am I going? What's going to happen when? And Skip Potter talks about this all the time, or
Mhm.
Skip talks about Talbot. Sorry, I have
Yeah.
a Skip Potter who's a friend of mine. Skip Talbot talks about this all the
Skip
time, which
Talbot.
is
Mhm.
yeah, which is always you have to have an exit strategy, and that is so important. But if you're far enough away from the storm, you're rarely in that situation. That's not
Mhm.
entirely true. I almost got hit by a satellite tornado in 2004.
Shoot.
Yep, those are rogue in near the storm.
I don't think they're rogue, though. I think if we're just not paying attention to the
Well, we noticed it. Yeah,
inverted, the other column of, coming through the RFD, we're not paying attention to this little nubby nub, and we're paying attention to the big thing right over there.
it was
Nubby
cool
nub.
though. It was an anticyclonic tornado,
Yeah.
and I watched it come down in a field across from me. But
Wow.
I mean, those are all cool things. But for the most part, if you're further back, you don't have to keep removing, and you don't have to like hurry. You can take some time and really appreciate the storm. So those are my big
Right.
overarching lessons that I've learned.
Okay, I have those are great, by the way. You're so articulate. Everyone I have on this podcast, except me, are very articulate. They've already thought through these things. They've experienced so much that it just comes out naturally. But I want to ask you this question: have you been broken? Like, you're just like, you know what? Screw this. I'm done with storm chasing. Or even for just a small moment, like you busted so hard and then you busted again and you busted again. 3 weeks of busts, and you're going, I just spent however many hundreds or thousands of dollars on this stupid hobby. I'm done, done, done. Have you ever been broken by storm
Last year
chasing?
nearly broke me, but not in the real sense.
Okay.
I didn't see any tornadoes last year in what was probably the most prolific tornado year I've ever
That's
seen.
right.
There was unbelievable photogenic tornadoes all the way through August. It was
Yeah.
just stupid.
Gary
And
and all these
we
other,
just made decisions based on what we thought was good meteorology at the time that my
really.
chasing partners and I made decisions. And I have a limited span of time that I chase because I adult. And I just it was just it was a year for me to have really bad luck. And I think the best thing about this is if you don't have years like that, you're not chasing enough because you're going to have these years and you're going to miss out on. I have to emotionally let go of my own ego. I am
Yeah.
not going to be able to be on
Get
every
everything.
storm. I am not going to be able to take every great photo. I am not, Theodore Roosevelt said, that comparison is the thief of joy. That's another really
Hmm.
profound quote for me. Now, in the acute moment, I won't remember that, but if I'm comparing myself to others, then this
All
hobby
the time.
is brutal. It's rare that I have a photo that I think no one else has taken a better photo of a storm. It happens. It happened couple years ago El Dorado in Oklahoma. But for the most part, other people's pictures are always going to look better than mine. People are going to capture more than I can capture. People who have actually managed to find a way to sustain their livelihood as storm
Mhm.
chasers, never going to be able to compete with them.
Right.
I have to be content with what I get, and the
Oh,
best
man.
part for me is that I'm actually pretty much an optimist, and I enjoy pretty much all the aspects of storm chasing.
Yeah.
So even if it's extremely disappointing and it burns, Like I missed Arnett last year by about 10 minutes
Oof,
with the LP tornado. That was a really
that was a pretty one. I wasn't there
yeah.
either, obviously. I only spent 4 days on the planes last year.
Yeah, I mean, missing that by minutes was brutal because, you know, it was an incredible tornado. An incredible tornado with structure and LP formation. I mean, they're rare like that.
Right.
And I have to be okay with the fact that I made the best decisions I could at the time, you know, and I can't go back and change the past. So Lily Tomlin said, "Acceptance is giving up the hope for a different past."
Mm.
And so I usually move pretty well towards acceptance.
Oh, man.
A bad day storm chasing is still not a day in the office,
Right? Exactly.
and it's a chance to hang out with friends, see beautiful countryside.
That's
What are you
why I
gonna do?
love that's why I love the monsoon. Like, can you imagine?
You are so spoiled. Give me a
I
break.
start I started with the reverse, right? I started learning to love the monsoon. First of all, I'm a desert bunny for at birth and born in El Paso and then moved to Arizona. And I've been out here my whole life. I've always seen the Chihuahuan Desert, the Sonoran Desert, and then I get to see during the summer months the beauty of the monsoon, and I get to share that with people and share these wild, super elevated thunderstorms that just
Amazing.
drop these incredible dozens of incredible bolts of lightning over cities and saguaros and all sorts of cool stuff. And I've learned how to capture that in a really strategic way, with all the knowledge of speaking of all the mountain ranges and crappy roads out here. I've learned how to navigate them and be set up when those outflow boundaries kick up and they start the next storm 100 miles away or 50 miles away. I've learned how to do that. And I'm so proud of myself for integrating and just getting better and better year after year and not succumbing to the brokenness of chasing, you
Yeah, I
know?
mean, you have to, and it's hard because, like I said, the happiest time that I was a chaser was probably in the 90s.
Mm,
Smaller numbers, not much traffic, but more to the point, failure was the steady state. The successes were rare. And now the
right.
expectation is the opposite, that failure shouldn't happen, but it does. And
Yeah.
I may not get to see stuff because I choose to be safe. There's Morton in 2022. I just couldn't get through. There was an incredible Morton, Texas tornado, absolute dust eater. And as I tried to get close to the storm, the dust was so thick that I couldn't have situational awareness. And I missed out on what was really an incredible tornado.
Oh,
Pulled
man.
back and ended up getting an incredible structure shot of the whole thing. And that was like really great. But, again, sort of that, I actually also had one other major camera thing that I have to bring up.
Absolutely. I'll talk
Takes
cameras all day, by the way.
It takes only a few seconds. Drive
Hmm.
past or walk past power lines.
I
Yes,
know.
you can
Yes.
absolutely edit them out, but it is so much easier if you don't have to.
Not
Just
when
pay
you're time
attention to where your
lapsing.
power lines are, get away from them from your field of vision, and you will be
Hmm.
so much happier, trust me.
I say the same thing about that and any kind of advertisement, billboards and stuff when you're trying to shoot storms close to the city. I cannot have those things in my. I do not want, Baja Blast and Taco Bell signs on in front of my epic bolt dropping into the city. That's a no go. I'll AI or edit or whatever I need to get that out. But bottom line is, I won't put myself in harm's way like that. I want to actually share just as we pull this up, I want to share a couple of you sent me a few shots
Yeah.
that have some significance towards you. I'd love to talk about this. And we kind of went through kind of the depths of the tough stuff of Joplin. Wow. Thanks for sharing that, by the way. That's more information about this unique event that, needs to get out there. I think the entirety of the storm needs to be studied and brought to reality so that we all understand that. By the way, just real quickly speaking about Joplin, in my visit to Joplin, I went through that park and I went to the memorials. And it was so important to me that I got to see the names and I got to, the kids were there again in the park and I could hear them having so much joy in the park. If you just stop and listen to the wind and the kids that were there that day, the day that I visited, and it just brought me, hope that there's hope through all of this damage and destruction and the bringing together of these people, these communities. But also the one thing that I noticed about Joplin at this park was that every little every little picnic table had a shelter. You could jump into this big box and avoid the next tornado. Like they were smart about it. They like, okay, we're going to learn from the past. They designed stuff so that people could be saved next time. So, anyways, I just thought that
That's
was a
really
great
great.
thing.
Yeah. No, that's terrific.
But
This
tell me,
Yeah.
why? What is
So
so amazing
this
about
was
this?
from our bust year last year. We busted pretty hard.
Gosh.
This is it. So
Okay.
what do we do? So I had several shots in mind for my chasing group. And so left to right is me. There's Alethea Contis in the background. There's Chris Cridler. And in the foreground is George Karunas,
Very cool.
background Dave Lewison, and then Scott McParland off to the right, which isn't our entire chase group, but it's most of our chase group. I wanted to try and capture some fake album covers, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
here we are in Shamrock.
Super wide.
Yep. And I absolutely love this old fashioned, gas station there, which is actually even prettier at night when it's lit up. But here we are. This is a day we ended up busting
No.
again. But I really enjoyed just, this is what I'm talking about. This is camaraderie.
Mm-hmm.
This is having
Mm-hmm.
fun while out there instead of worrying about the outcome. This
Sure.
was a process thing and I loved it. So that was
Okay,
what
but
that was.
what's the name of the album?
We
This
haven't
needs
we
a, na-
haven't
a
we
name.
God, we had some great names, but none of them were really stuck. I forget. I'm getting old. Sorry.
It's okay. That's a good shot, though. And I love that you spoke about that too. Oops. Yeah. What is this?
Not a storm. So this is another interesting thing.
Macro.
So I absolutely, it's funny. I was born and raised out here in Colorado. We used to get really bad winters, and so I learned to hate winter. And when I went away for my residency, I decided to go to Florida, which I thought would get me away from the snow, and it did for the most part. But it didn't take away from the winter blues that I would get. And so when we
Hmm.
moved back, I really needed to find some way to be at peace with snow. And so I learned how to do snowflake macro photography.
Wow.
And that makes me look forward to snow just as much as storm chasing, but it's a
No
lot more
kidding.
peaceful. And so this is a snowflake up close. This is actually what it looks like when it's lit by an LED. The details are insane. There's the flux
Wow.
capacitor in the center.
No, that's Tony Stark's heart. That's the what's it
That
called?
too.
The
And I tore it right out of him. And this particular snowflake
wow.
was no more than 2 millimeters. And so the macro
So
photography
cool.
has given me a chance to really appreciate winter. And fun fact, unfortunately, the winter we've had this year has been awful. We have had a
Right.
sum total of 5 significant snows that I was able to take any
My
snowflake
goodness.
photos. And so it actually was a disappointing winter. And now we're going to
Right.
face drought, which you'll face as well.
Yeah.
And it also will have a downstream effect, I think, because of the drought on EML for sure. It's going to be a big problem moving into the plains in the spring.
That's crazy. Yeah, currently it is 96 degrees outside
We're at
at
84.
the border.
We're at 84 in Denver
Yeah.
in March, our snowiest month. No, and there's still
Smooth
one more to go.
channel.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love this.
So this is an accidental photo. This is so great. So this was up in north central Kansas.
Is that a tornado
And
back there?
that is. That is a rope of a
Baby.
tornado near Hayes. And I was actually trying to adjust the shot for the tornado,
Yeah, the exposure.
and I
Right.
accidentally had knocked it from manual to auto. And as part of the
Wow.
auto, it was going to be an extended shutter speed. And I just happened to have it. You can see there's a little bit of blur because
Mhm.
I was trying to get my hand back up to do the manual. This clear
Yep.
channel bolt just shot right down in frame.
Sick.
I call it crisscross because here you have
Mhm.
this rope out. The next tornado that would form down and to the left of this photo, which I didn't get, was in La
Mhm.
Crosse, Kansas. But this clear channel crisscrossing right in front of the tornado, completely by accident in my settings, turned out beautifully. I was very
That's
excited.
awesome. That
Yeah, it was
is
really cool.
definitely once in a lifetime shot.
Oh my gosh. Now this was the
Whoo!
El Dorado
Look at that
tornado from
structure.
2 years ago,
Goodness
and
gracious.
that was a phenomenal chase for a number of reasons. the best part about that was you can kind of see it to the south along the RFD, very
Mhm.
dusty. This was a very dusty
Yep.
storm, and a lot of people got cut off seeing the tornado from that dust. And
Right.
I intentionally wanted to drive far east of the storm and move north.
Look at that
And
structure.
meanwhile, we're driving away from the storm. You're looking due west. I was traveling
Mhm.
due east with my chase partners, and we had to just keep on traveling east because I wanted to get away from that dust and then move into the
Right.
inflow. And we
Nice.
ended up hitting the
Right
perfect
here.
spot. There was not an ounce of wind where we were,
Really?
not an ounce. And we actually ended up pulling into the small town, and then there was this little field there, and it was really cool. My friend Chris Cridler and Alicia Contis, they parked in front of us
Mm.
and gave us a foreground. There's no foreground, but she pulled in front, and that gave us a nice foreground. Oh, I was. It gives a perspective. Yeah, I mean, because you can see it's just flat forever. And
Right.
we got to watch this incredible multi vortex tornado from a position where the vault was, uh,
Right.
and get the vault. I mean,
I know.
that's dreamy to me. Absolutely
Right.
dreamy.
I love the section too where the you can start to see the hail core dropping
Hail
out
core
of
is
the
right to
forward
our
flank.
right and moving north.
Yeah.
Oh, we got to just sit there and watch that thing for, I think, a good 20-30 minutes, not move.
Give give me a little bit of teach me just something really quickly because from what I'm looking at here, it almost looks like the meso is getting ready to do a handoff. Am I right? Or
It
I'm
looked
still
like it
learning
was
that.
going to, but it actually handed off.
Oops, sorry,
Yep.
messed
No,
that
that's
up.
okay. It handed off to the left. So to the
No
right,
kidding.
that actually is a feeder. That is a feeder. That is a tail cloud coming
Oh yeah,
in.
yeah, coming in.
And it is actually
Okay, I
sucking that in.
see.
And what you're seeing is the RFD cutting into the clouds. So you can
Right.
see the RFD wrapping
Mhm.
right in front of the
Yep.
tornado. And so that whole structure eventually spun behind the tornado.
I see. I
And in the
see. Okay.
background back there,
Thought it
that's
would
where
be
the
back
next
there.
tornado formed.
My goodness. See, that's good to know. Now I'm understanding that too.
Was definitely an RFD cut, and again, we were just in the perfect
Beautiful.
spot where we were not feeling any of the RFD winds, so we had to just sit there, and it was a multi-vortex tornado, and stayed fairly stationary
Speaking
for a
of,
while.
I'm looking at that too, and I know we've kind of gone over a little bit, but I love the jackhammer of these kind of multi vortex
Yeah,
tornadoes.
me too.
I think that's what I'm going to start calling them more because you can see the full condensation in the dirt, but if you look into it, you see it almost looks like a guy with a jackhammer, and he's just like, "There's three.
It was
He's
so
holding the
great,
different." That's
and this
awesome.
stayed over open territory. It caused no damage, so it's like all the things. And we were by ourselves. There were virtually no chasers where we were, and I was so grateful for
That's
that.
even better, right? I mean,
Yeah,
let me see. I think I did that. Yep. And then we have this one. What a
yeah.
monster.
This is my moment in the sun. This is May 31st, 2010. This is the
Okay.
Campo, Colorado tornado, and actually it's barely Colorado. Right, the fence that's right in the foreground is actually at the first stop into the state of Oklahoma from Colorado. This is
Wow.
looking slightly north northwest, and this storm. Oh, that's the RFD wrapping in RFD. Yep. And actually, the thing about this storm that's so hysterical is it came from a blown forecast day. So that morning, it forecast for Goodland around on I-70 at the Colorado Kansas border area. And we sat there under a really beautiful cumulus field that wasn't doing anything. Meanwhile, to our south, we could see a storm that had gone up because we could see its anvil in an area which wasn't really forecast to have anything going on it. And then that
Wow.
anvil stretched from horizon to horizon, indicating that it had found some sort of ventilation. And we were 2.5 hours from that. So we're like, screw it. We're going to leave I don't usually do this. I'm going to leave my forecast area. And we
Mhm.
headed south. And it took us 2.5 hours to get down to the storm. Literally, we got down there. It put down its first tornado, which was low contrast, nothing really exciting. We traveled underneath the rain free base, got south of it, which you see here, and then it put
Wow.
down this incredible stovepipe with a dust shield around it and the structure, the colors. There's
Man.
never been a tornado like that for me. And it stayed that way for, I think, 25 or 35 minutes, destroying just a couple outbuildings. So
Even
relatively.
the semis are like, "Nope." They're
Well, I
just
think that's
pulled
what
over.
really adds to this
It does.
photo
They're
is
like,
you again
"Nope."
foreground, right? It's always the
Yeah,
foreground.
and the chasers there are probably having the time of their lives. That's
Yeah, that
awesome.
there's a small Schadenfreude moment for just a second. It was that this was also the year of Vortex 2, and
Okay.
sitting not even 100 miles away,
Man,
um, yeah, it was Vortex 2. They took a down day because they didn't think there'd be anything. And
well, it's
they saw this
painful.
streamed on the Weather Channel, and it was a rough
No
day for them.
kidding,
Yeah.
man. But it wasn't a rough day for you though,
My God, it was the best chase day of my career.
because
Absolutely.
it's those kind of memories. Like, don't you feel very blessed and special? Don't you feel a special part that in all of these years and all the generations of humanity's existence, that someone like you and I can actually figure out whether 20, 30 years ago, if you're having not to fold the maps, or and just taking a shot out there without very limited radar, or nowadays where we can find out exactly where the motion is. We are so in a position in time and lucky to be able to get out there and see
Yeah.
one tornado in our lifetime to navigate to it.
Yes. That was it for me. That was a day of incredible luck. And I didn't feel like I was special, but I felt like I was witnessing something that was incredibly
My goodness.
rare, not forecast,
Yeah.
overperformed, absolutely stunning in every way, shape, or form. And I've been trying to get there ever since.
Dang. Well, we always continue marching on, and that's my final question is, what's your current pursuit? Are you have anything storm related, since you are the storm doctor?
Yeah, there's two answers to that. The first is that a lot of the research that I'm doing right now in disaster medicine continues forward in a way that is incredibly gratifying because it was born from storm chasing. And we're helping, my team. I have an incredible team. We're moving the needle on how we can improve care during disasters. And that to me is very exciting. So that's always going to be my passion till I retire, which is not for a while. The second thing is, I'm just a, dumb old guy who likes storms. I miss more than I get. I'm not the best storm chaser out there, and I'm okay with that. I know who I am, and I know what I like to see. And so long as I am content with storms in general, there's never going to be a day that I'm going to really feel terrible. I may feel like, damn, I
Yeah.
should have been able to get that. But on the other hand, most of the time I just have a great time. So that's the plan this spring.
Jason, you have answered the question of resilience. How do you remain resilient? If anybody listens to this whole podcast and gets to this point, the answer is in everything that we just got to this point in this podcast. You
Yeah,
spoke
I
of
mean,
resilience.
yeah, resilience only comes when you stop trying to be perfect. And resilience only comes when you can be grateful. So gratitude is the antidote to, when we talk about resilience,
Yeah.
gratitude moves you a long way there. And I think it's unfortunate that some people are so driven to get
Yeah.
the best shot that they lose their enjoyment of what they're out there trying to do. And,
You see it all the time. It's so pervasive in the storm chasing
yeah,
community.
I mean,
People
I don't know
crashing and
why.
burning.
Yeah, I don't know why, I ended up getting lucky enough to be visible in the storm chasing community when I really don't have the success rate, the following, et cetera, that other people do. But that's not what my goal is. So it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter to me how the storm chasing community views me. I just hope that they'll yield to walking softly and, being able
I
to
love that.
enjoy it and have fun. Geez, have fun. For God's sake. It's
Right.
so much fun, especially when you get the shot. It's great. But even when you don't get the shot, it's still fun.
Yeah. Well, I normally do a 10, a 5 or 10 question lightning round. I don't think
Go for
that's
it.
necessary here, but
Okay, then no. No lightning
I do
round.
have one question. Yeah, because I already know what they are. I mean, you already answered mountains or oceans. What about that?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Is it?
So mountains for sure.
Okay, that's
Absolutely.
I knew
I
that
don't
was
like
my answer.
sand. I don't like sand.
Okay, and I kind of knew that one, but I also know the answer to this one: NATO's or structure. Structure.
I'm a structure
See,
whore. I'll sell myself out for structure. I don't mind.
sunrise or sunset. I'm gonna think that your answer. Well, I'm not gonna say it. I'll let you
Sunrise is
answer.
actually amazing. So sunrise because not everyone shares in that.
Yeah, I thought you would have been the sunrise. And finally, what's your top item on your bucket list to get what's your next shot? I know you said you before we started recording that you've never captured sprites. Man, you
Yep.
got to come out here. I'll show you some sprites, but Paul gets sprites all the time. I get sprites
Yeah,
every other
almost
year.
too many times. So, but
I know.
yeah. So I think part of my bucket list is to photograph the glaciers either up in Greenland or down in Antarctica. I would love to do that. and also Iceland during the summer. We went there during the winter. It was absolutely spectacular. I cannot recommend Iceland in the winter more for people.
Really? But it's just freaking cold.
Wasn't too bad for it wasn't too much worse than the States, but the thing that's amazing about it there is they have these incredible ice caves, and they only exist transiently every year during
Wow.
the wintertime, and they get hollowed out by basically melted water. And when you're sitting underneath, 20 or 30 feet of the most crystal clear glass you've ever seen, it doesn't even look real. And the way the light
Yeah.
filters down and comes in the incredible blues with black sand because it's a
Right.
volcano. Oh, get me out of here. It's the greatest.
I've seen a video where a guy was there and he does this and he goes, It's the best tasting. And I'm thinking, bro, you just drank million year old microbes is
And let
what
me
you
be
just
clear,
did.
those microbes can still kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Filter
I'm
that
sure it
bad
might
boy
taste
and
good.
boil it.
Yeah. Right. Woo. Like
Yeah, you do
we're
not
talking Jurassic
chew
Park.
on glacial ice, do not do
Right.
that. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
It looks crystal. I did. I know. I have sipped from a high stream and then up in Mount Lemon, north of Tucson. And then as I came back, I saw a warning. It says, "Warning: cryptosporidium."
Mhm.
Guess what? If you've ever known what it's like to have skid marks on the way home,
Yeah.
not fun.
Nope.
Cryptosporidium is not your friend.
No, it is not your friend.
Learn from me. Don't drink spring water out of because the deer poop in it, and then you get the poops, and it lasts a long time. Jason, this has been wonderful. And you bring the creds, you bring the street cred with, some of the advice that you shared. And I just hope that people listen. And if they don't, they don't.
That's
But
fine too. I don't
this
know
has
it
been
all.
fun.
It's just my
But I
my
wanted to get to
approach.
know you more too, more
I
than just
enjoyed getting
that.
to meet you and talk to you too,
Thank
especially
you.
beforehand too.
Like you're wearing something too. I'm trying to do this and I always forget at the beginning. But what are you wearing?
NASA. Go
You know what
NASA.
I'm wearing? Remember, kids, electricity will kill you. And yes, I was struck
Fabulous.
by lightning. So I love
Yeah,
this
no,
shirt.
that's good. Yeah, that hasn't stopped you or me from chasing
I
lightning.
know. I
Yeah, to see the updraft downdraft interface and to be away from that. That's where the
yeah.
sparks are coming.
Where can people find you, basically?
Yeah, at Storm Doctor on Twitter, and stormdoctor.com is my images, which include both fire and ice.
I
So
love it.
snow, tornadoes, and beautiful landscapes. So you can get me
Awesome.
there, and Facebook just by my name. I
Right.
don't do Insta, so if you reach out to me on Insta, I'm sorry, I'm
Forget
old.
it.
Yeah,
It's a fraudulent account
yeah, it's
from
there,
Cambodia or somewhere.
but
Yeah.
yeah, reach me on Twitter. That's totally cool. I'm good with that.
Jason, this has been great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Lori. I appreciate you.
That is going to wrap it up on this episode. I hope you like and follow. Please comment. And if you have any questions for Dr. Persoff, please put them in the comments, send me a message or whatever. Let us know if this is the kind of thing you're interested in hearing about and comment. If you disagree, I'd love to hear about it and
Me
why.
too.
But bring the science, bring the facts, and I'd love to hear those things about as well. So thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good one. Peace out. Until the next one.